will note for those of you as you were looking at the report, down in the budget recommendation section, there is a placeholder, number 9, that says other budget recommendations. So we did record the recommendation that Fred had laid out in the last meeting. But if you wanted to have some more conversation about anything that's potentially going to be in the manager's proposed budget and have some blanket recommendation about inflation or the tax rate or something like that, we did leave a placeholder there for that as well. So just wanted to note that. Having said that, I would kind of open the floor here.
So actually, I do have one question. This is about that fire department thing that we talked about. Can we make it explicit that we'd like to know how much of that is to keep ISO 2 versus to go to ISO 1? So remember, that was what we thought was the difference, was he wants to aspire to be an ISO 1 rated city, but we're ISO 2 now. And the question is, how much of those many, many missing positions are needed to keep us at ISO 2 versus ISO 1?
I can put that very explicitly in there, Fred, but I will tell you, when you dig into the details, it's not going to be as simple as this many people would get us to an ISO 1. It would be this many people, and we need to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay, so, but it was the personnel thing that's very apparent, though, that like something is happening.
Very, very much so. Let me make a note. Janice can make a note too, and we will add something specifically about reviewing the number of personnel as it relates to minimum requirements for an FPA to get up to ISO standards for a 1. Absolutely. And Fred, I will tell you, we did not get a chance to have the fire chief come and talk to you, but we will be looking at CBAC's work plan for next year. And if this is something that the CBAC is very interested in, potentially looking at public safety deployment and salaries is something that we could look at. But we will have a new city manager coming in here in a couple of months, and so we'll probably be discussing with the city manager if that new manager has any priorities that they would like the CBAC to look at next year too. So, okay. So anything other than that you would like to see changed in any of the other recommendations that are potentially a part of this report?
I mean, my question for the group was going to be if there are any places where we want maybe stronger language isn't the word I want to use, but just if there are any kind of points we wanted to emphasize more, but given that there's only a few of us here, that might be rendered a little bit moot. In lieu of that, the only other thing that I would potentially suggest is, especially, we spent a lot of time on both the, behavioral health and other social services recommendations, and also the law enforcement services recommendations. One of the things that kind of that we did talk about during those presentations was kind of room for growth. And there isn't really kind of any of that language really in there. So just if there's a way to say kind of explore future opportunities to grow those programs, that I think we thought were kind of, especially with the social services one, we talked about growing the kind of continuing to grow out the multi-service facility, and potential for continuing to grow the transportation to and from and stuff like that. So yeah, just I think if there's a point of emphasis that I would like to see that didn't exist, it would be kind of with an eye towards growing those programs, because we think it's worth the investment, not just the creation. And open to everyone else checking me on that if
given the other two, Fred or Ross. So Tony, this is at the end of this meeting, we're going to say report approved pending amendments. So I want to make sure that we get the language pretty tight here.
Yeah.
Don't have to come back to you again. So are we generally talking about exploring future growth opportunities in areas related to social service provision within the community, or do you have very specific areas that you really wanted to highlight?
Well, I think especially, right, the looking at the behavioral health section, right, growing the BEAR program, okay. And we talked about kind of transportation to and from social service facility. Why am I blanking on the location of that?
Talking about the Highland Avenue facility.
Yeah, the
that-
Highland Avenue, right. I think that that's not mentioned specifically in the report anywhere, but kind of continuing to support efforts to grow both the facility itself, but also the services provided. I think was something that we talked about at one point. And then, I guess the other part for the consolidated, law enforcement services, I guess that's kind of part where that would be a step ahead, right? We kind of have to continue to explore the opportunities for consolidation before we can explore opportunities of growth. So I guess the focus would be more on the behavioral and other social services section.
You mentioned law enforcement. I brought that up in an earlier email, that maybe more of an emphasis on that, since we had a whole session from the chief of police, sheriff and police having more consolidated or collaborative type services.
Yeah,
I think some of that language is in there, right? The future place for the city's emergency call center strongly urges the city to continue to review opportunities for consolidation in the name of efficiency and, reducing redundancy. So I think some of that language is there in the law enforcement section, but yeah, open to suggestions as well.
Yeah, I was going to say much of what you just said, but my impression was that in the short term, like the better communication and possible consolidation of call center was something could be done, but that more substantial consolidation would be a very long-term project. That right now, I think what they says here, which is review other models, is probably the stage where it would be at, right? Because this would be a long-term project to consolidate the city and county services. I mean, at least that was my impression.
So yeah, Fred, what in terms of the co-located 911 center, the county is beginning, as Captain Allen told you, to dispatch fire calls. That's already moving forward and happening. So the consolidation would be for total kind of law enforcement, sheriff, and all of that. And when we say short term here, I want to make sure we capture short term, hopefully 24 months ish type, not like 3 to 6 month type short term.
I was thinking year and a half, but yeah, year and a half to long term, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and then on the recommendation number 7, in terms of looking at other consolidated research, what y'all had told us, we had showed you kind of the Charlotte model, and several folks had said, could you look to Virginia, Tennessee, anywhere else regionally and find something else that you can maybe look at too. And so that's really what that recommendation was to do the additional research for other consolidated law enforcement models outside the state.
Outside the states?
Outside the states, you meaning internationally?
No, put it in there. Put it in there.
Oh, okay. Yes, absolutely.
In the word. Yeah. And I do have a question, just as a reminder to me, under item 4, the county's mobile integrated health unit. Does that include the guy at the library who does stuff with the homeless from the county? You know what I'm talking about? They have somebody who's more or less stationed at the library who helps interface with their Jose was his name, I want to say. This is not ringing any bells for anybody.
I remember Denise talking about that position, but I don't specifically remember whether it's a part of MIH or if it's actually separate to that program. Do you remember that?
From what I remember, that was a part of their MIH program. It was a position that they had permanently located at the library.
Okay, because I thought that was that position pick would be primed for collaboration with the Bear unit to the extent that the Bear unit works downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to add wording specifically about working with that?
If that's not part of the MIH, yes. If it is, no.
Okay.
Okay.
We can review that with Denise and kind of edit that to the extent that it fits.
Yeah, I think related to Fred's point, this is, as with the future conversation that we've kind of pinned with the fire chief, kind of if going forward as a part of the ongoing affordable housing conversation, we could start to integrate conversations about kind of unhoused resources, or resources for the unhoused population in Winston-Salem, that would be something that I would be interested in exploring kind of the next session.
Okay. As any good budget director should at this point, I would interject and just say generally, when we talk about expansion, Tony, this is kind of getting back to the exploring expansion of Bear
Sure.
and transportation and those types of things. Those are all increased costs.
Right.
And generally increased costs these days are in the form of additions to the tax rate. So often the CBAC is encouraging the city council not to raise the tax rate. So that gets kind of back to that number 9. I'll reintroduce if you have other recommendations related to the budget, but just wanted to point that out. Absolutely, we will include everything that you guys have. But part of what we do down here in the basement of City Hall is trying to balance those realities of the need or desire for increased services with the need and desire to not have your taxes raised to pay for them. So,
yeah, I mean, potentially, and I don't know if creating more integrated language between, the bullet points there would make sense, but if to kind of offset that type of concern, we could tie the language about increasing expansion of kind of social services through Bear, the MIH program, in hopes of offsetting some of the burden on, right, the law enforcement and other social services, because the efficiency language is built in already in what is it, recommendation number 6. So if the way to smooth that a little bit is to do so in the name of savings, I don't object to that either.
this is a potentially very ripe conversation.
Yeah.
There are a lot of models out there that talk about the savings from a lot of these programs, and the way that they estimate them is very interesting. And they also cross jurisdictional boundaries. So in some cases, the city may be spending money to save the county money, which to the taxpayer is great,
Right.
but organizationally and politically is somewhat of a difficult sell sometimes. But just wanted to throw those ideas out there, and can definitely come back for conversation again in future years to talk about how some of these were implemented and some of the effects that they had.
Well, and maybe the language is, kind of explore ways to monitor, costs and cost offsets or cost and savings tied to the balance between, the increase in social services versus the reduced burden on law enforcement, right? That rather than growth, maybe that's smarter language.
My mind is spinning in several different ways.
I bet it is.
We can put kind of enhance the efficiency language a little bit, just to say, to specifically look at ways to offset costs between divisions and services or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's an area I'd love to dive into more, just maybe not today.
And I think you're right. I think it's important to continue to tie those things together, because the point is that they're not separate, even though like the recommendations are by definition enumerated and separate. I think they are related.
Anything else we need to add, delete, modify to more accurately capture what it is you would like to propose to the city council? And I do believe, if my memory serves me correctly, and I read the minutes, it's been a while, Fred, we did elect you as the chair of this fair group.
Sure did.
And Tony as vice chair.
So we have a budget workshop coming up on Tuesday, May the 30th. And so, Fred, it would be you leading the charge potentially in person to explain or go through a summary of these recommendations and discuss with the council. So would make sure that there's nothing here that needs to be added or deleted. And then, Fred, we would come back and create some summary notes for you as talking points.
Nice.
And have some, it is you presenting, but we like to kind of give you the Cliff's Notes to help out. So
Hey, that makes my life easier. I like that.
Still glad to have dodged that bullet.
give it 2 weeks, Tony. You never know.
Right.
Fred mysteriously has a class he has to teach.
Well, it's summertime. I don't teach in the summer, so no. Where is it, by the way?
So the budget workshops will actually be held in City Hall. And
Oh, City Hall. Okay.
and I will tell you, I'll have to update you. There is some conversation post-COVID about moving back to the committee room, which is a separate room. It's on the same floor as the council chambers. They're about 30 or 40 feet from each other, but I'll give you the room once we decide which room it's going to be in. So
I'm sure I can be directed from one room to another room. Yes.
sure. So I am going to delete number 9 that says other budget recommendations, unless you have anything specific you want to add there, with anything you saw on trial balanced budget or early forecast. So we will just delete that one. It was not the substantial part of your work plan anyway, but I just wanted to make sure we had that conversation. So we will call 3 a quorum to officially call the vote on this. So if someone would like to make a motion to approve the report as amended based on the language edits you've given us here.
So moved.
Second.
All righty. All in favor, say aye, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Whichever you prefer. All right, we will call the report approved. There are actually 2 other things that we should have gotten on the agenda that we didn't. One is approval of minutes from the prior meeting. If anybody had any edits to those, let us know. Otherwise, we can take another quick vote on those to be approved. They will be just attached to the back of your report, so that anyone can read them.
Yeah, motion to approve those.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and second. We'll take a aye and a right hand again.
Aye.
All right. Minutes approved. Last thing on the agenda that should have been there, and Ross, I appreciate you bringing it back up. The official calendar for CBAC has a June meeting. Normally we would be finalizing and we would talk about the manager's proposed budget. So we can keep that on the calendar. If you'd like, we could come back next month and talk about what the manager has proposed and how that differs from what you've seen in early budget forecasts. That again would not be a 2-hour long meeting, probably in the realm of 30 minutes, and answer any questions you had.
Question. Will that be the new city manager or the current city manager?
It'll be the current city manager. So Mr. Garrity's proposed budget to council will be delivered here to the city council in about 2 weeks time. And Fred, you will be coming to their first workshop to provide that report or summary of the CBAC report. And so Mr. Garrity will not retire officially until I believe the end of June. So council will adopt, if everything goes to schedule, council will adopt the budget and Mr. Garrity will retire that Friday.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, I'd like to see it. I mean, yeah.
Okay. So we will keep that one on the calendar. It will be a somewhat brief meeting, but I will go through essentially what the council has seen as the proposed budget, and then obviously they'll have a couple of workshops before that meeting is scheduled. I don't have the exact day of it, but we'll get it out in an email to you as a reminder to make sure everybody's got it on their calendar. But it was part of the original plan that Tanya had sent out when we started back in November. Without any further questions, comments, or concerns, I think that is all we have for today. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time, and then we will, like I said, get that email back out. We'll see you in June for a quick meeting about where we landed on the proposed budget and where council might be for the adopted budget.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, y'all.